Hey guys, welcome into the PuggoReborn channel. We're going to be doing the top 10 most valuable recruits today, and I'm joined here with PuggoRedemption.
What's up, everyone?
And so what's going to be unique about this is we're both going to be doing our separate top 10s in this video, and we're going to go 10, 10, 9, 9, and so on all the way up to 1. And while that is going to be important for how we're doing this, it's going to be a longer video. So in the description below, there's going to be timestamps, as always, for these videos, so that way you can catch up and just see what our thoughts and opinions. If you want to listen to the whole thing, it's going to be a great long listen to, of course. But there is a criteria that we're going to be following here, and it's very important because there is such a diverse community of Battle Brother lovers that understand and what brothers do and so on, and how they view it. They might value somebody more than we do, and so on. But this is kind of how we're going to be following it. So Redemption, why don't you let them know about that?
Yeah, so everyone needs a way to choose whether a recruit is better than another, and so we came together and decided on 4 basic criteria. There's the stats. Everyone wants the best stats on their brothers, and so we looked at each recruit's potential stats. And as a side note, some recruits fulfill certain roles based on the stats they get. Say like archers, and some people have high resolve, so they might be bannermen. So we'll also kind of add value to a recruit if they fulfill a certain role better than the rest of the recruits. Another thing that we take a look at is costs of a recruit, whether that's the daily wages and the upfront costs. That will influence whether or not we like a recruit. Time of value. So you're not going to be starting off the game with a sellsword. It's unreasonable and unaffordable. And so we'll be taking a look at the recruits one by one at the time that they were made available or reasonably made available to you in the game. And we'll decide on their value at that current place and time. The last thing we take a look at is the events that each recruit can possibly have. Some recruits have really bad events, so that will hurt them a lot in their value. Some recruits have a lot of good events, and so we'll take a look at each recruit individually and really just gather up every last piece of them and make our best ranking of them.
Perfect. Yeah. So, and that's just to be fair, obviously, guys. Everyone's gonna have a different opinion. That's perfectly fine. So, all I'm asking from you guys is, if you agree, disagree, let us know in the comment section below. And best yet, the best thing you guys can do for us right now is to go into the comment section and give us your top 10 most valuable recruits. And so without further ado, to get into this, we're going to do some honorable mentions real quick. We're going to roll through it. I'm going to say my 3. We both ended up picking 3 different recruits that we are... they just didn't quite make it, but there are some little reasons. We'll give a little pro and con real quick, and then we'll get into the top 10. So starting out for me, I'm going to do my first 3. Number 1, I have the Monk. And I just want to say for the Monk, everybody probably would say, man, that's got to be like number 5, right? Because of all the great events, all of the, pretty much just the bannerman aspect of them, keeping hedge knights from butting heads and killing each other, right? That's such a big part. But for me, the way I value them is, I always need one of them, right? Just to keep, because I'm always looking for a hedge knight at some point in my campaigns. But ultimately, I know that if I didn't get a hedge knight, there's always going to be a lot of good bannermen, which I will go over in later on. But they do have some great events, of course, and I could see them falling in. It just didn't quite make it for me. The next one is Bastards. Bastards are really a mixed bag for me. One minute they have great stats, the next minute I just pull hard on them. It's just not that great. The cost and so on of them. The event that can bring an assassin is really nice, but ultimately it just fell out of my list. And then finally, most of my viewers were going to be like, what the heck, Puggo, what is your deal? But the Witch Hunter fell out of my list. And the biggest reason for that is because it's different from Legends mod in this, but not a great difference. It's just, I don't focus on having many Witch Hunters. I will have 1 or 2. I always try to go to hit on some of them, but there are the problems of the cost being at like 27. Sometimes you can find them really cheap. I've seen them at 800. But yeah, you're really going to gamble your money at that point. So don't get me wrong, you'll see them in the campaigns, but it just fell a little bit short. How about you, Redemption?
Yeah, so my three, starting off with the Adventurous Noble. Uh, love the great stats. When it comes to the late game, you are looking for those uh, best soldiers, best recruits, and I felt like Adventurous Noble is one of those I generally do take a look at. They're relatively on the cheap side of the expensive recruits, thinking like Raiders, Sellswords, up to Hedge Knights. They're very good stats. Like Adventurous Nobles have amazing stats. However, that being said, there is that huge flaw in the range defense. And so I feel like for me, that's a big issue. And when I'm looking for late game recruits, I want the best of the best. And with Venturous Nobles having such bad range defense, it's hard to make up for that. You can throw a kite shield on them, but that's a lot of fatigue that you add on. So I just couldn't quite put it in my top 10 just because that is such a thorn in my side whenever I want a Venturous Noble. The second one is Sellsword. Sellsword, again, you're looking for the best recruits. Sellswords, I love them. However, they just couldn't quite make it cost, or they just take up so much of your coin with the daily wage, or even just buying them. You're taking a big risk at trying to find a good sellsword because of how much cash you have to lend out to them just to find out if they're one of the better sellswords or not. And another thing that really was just a big knock on them was a particular event where they get a request to join another group and they're always asking for a raise. It's like they're one of the most expensive recruits in the game, and it's kind of annoying to have to, well, it's really annoying to have to worry about paying them more to just keep them around. And so they didn't quite make the top 10. My last honorable mention is the Brawler. Relatively cheap brother with pretty solid stats. Originally, when I was making my list, he was in the top 10. However, I just feel like as I was looking at the other recruits that are available in the game, the Brawler just kind of falls behind them for various reasons. Like, don't get me wrong, it is a solid brother, but the other recruits that I have in my top 10 edge it out for different reasons. So those are my honorable mentions.
Very good. All right, guys. Well, without further ado, let's get into our top 10. So, starting with my top 10, I'm going to be rolling out number 10, which is the Farmhand. Yes, the Farmhand is an amazing brother in itself. Early game, it does the job, and you can find one of these bad boys and actually have them for a long haul, which is great. One of the other things too that happens that's really nice is this doesn't happen a lot. I feel like I don't see it all the time, but you do have that chance for them to have I know I'm jumping to the events already, but in the events here, there's this opportunity to get 2 to 4 melee skill added on top, so that kind of does fall in line with the stat side of it. Ultimately, these guys can be your frontliners, they can be your backliners. Actually, I'm going to leave this open here. But the big thing is you can throw heavier armor on them sooner and get them into the fight. That part to me is very appealing, and of course, even in the late game, I've found some good farm hands. Now, late game, not ultra late. The way I play the game is I look at it as early, mid, late, and ultra late. And so in the late game, I have found some. The other thing too is they come at and this moving into cost, of course, they come in a nice package of a cost that's like anywhere from 18 to 33 or 330, right? And so that's a really good price point. And if you can go to a town with like a farm town of sorts, and you find 3 of them, if you wanted to in the mid stage, if you have, let's say you're at 5,000 crowns and there's 3 at this town, buy all 3 of them. Worst case scenario, you have some fodder. Best case scenario, you hit a stinking gem with stars maxed out on your melee, whereas your fatigue is already really stacked. I mean, you look at it, 100 to 20, you're already on the top end of the average recruit. So yeah, it's really nice. The only knock that I have on them is Of course, you could have a little more melee, you could have some more defense, whatever. That's just nitpicking. But it's more the resolve when you're at 28 to recuperate some of that. It's not the end of the world. They do have some perks that are excluded, of course, and that part to me, I don't know. You can end up with drunkards. You can end up with, gluttonous brothers. You can end up with, you all know these are some of the ones that I absolutely hate. But you can end up with a lot of the bad traits and some of the good, of course, which is it is what it is, right? So the next piece of the puzzle is cost of value, which I actually already kind of went over. Overall, throughout the game, they're always an affordable price. So they're universal. I just don't see them as, like, I don't go for farm hands late game normally to try to fill out my roster. There's other things that I'm more looking into, but definitely early to mid game I'm like, this is a good this is a really good test run to be just cherry picking these guys. So, and that's why it's my number 10, of course.
Yeah, so I'll probably get into that a little bit later, hint hint. But
Yeah.
For now, I'll go on to my number 10, and it's the Bastard. The Bastard background, I know Puggo kind of went over it just a little bit, but I do respect the potential of the Bastards. They're not the cheapest, but they're not really expensive either. You can generally get them for an affordable price, and their stats are pretty solid. I mean, especially when I'm looking at that melee skill, I can get up to 67 and low end is 52. Like, that is really good for the range at which, or like the cost of them. And I just really like it. I think they have really good stats all around. Yeah, I think you can get them on early on too. And even though there is that assassin event that originally, like, I never even took a look at Bastard, because like when I think assassin can try to kill your Bastard, it's like I don't want to put effort into someone in which it's no guarantee I'll even be able to keep them. They'll just get killed off in the end. But when I actually looked at the Bastard Assassin, and Puggo was actually telling me about this, and this is what came to my attention, is that they don't have to die. Like, you can get off with a temporary injury, or if you just really don't like him but you still have him around, you can attempt to swap him out for the assassin. Like, the fact that your Bastard doesn't have to die makes that into like a really good event for me. And so I was kind of surprised by that. And so because of the raw stats, relatively cheap to get, and no like truly bad events, like Bastard did get into my top 10 list. I do personally really like cheap recruits in the game, and that anything that I can get for cheap but still have the potential for top tier stats is something that I'm really going to value highly, and I feel like Bastard did enough to make it into my top 10 at the number 10 spot.
Yeah, I'm just to kind of piggyback on that even. You know what, guys, it was one of those things where Bastard was scratching the back end of this top 10, because if you really think about it, you know, your Hedge Knight's top end is 67. So really, you have a Bastard that if he gets any stars in melee, and for some reason he goes 65 or whatever, or as lucky as you can get, you get 65 to 70, or 65 to 67 is what I mean. Yeah, you have that some crazy late game potential. But to walk in, for me, and this is just my side of it, you know, of course, I struggled with that, the chance that you lose out on a good brother. Like, you get the bottom end of 90, a 52, a -5, you know, and even with the resolve being so low that it is, you don't know how long you could be sitting there waiting for that Bastard Assassin thing. Like, and also that the ability to get the assassin is also giving up 6,000 crowns. So you got to really love, you know what I mean, that type of it. But
Yeah.
how do you feel about with like that side of it, like that like at let's say the cost of buying a bastard is 1,400, right?
Well,
Yeah,
take
that's
a go ahead and click on the event itself, and inside it, it's actually you can trade out your bastard
right,
for
right. Yep, yep,
the assassin,
yep.
and so it's like you don't even have to pay the 6,000 crowns. Like, say you do get a bad bastard, generally you're getting these characters early on in the game, and so I probably wouldn't just release him right away. And say he does make it long enough that I do get this event, I feel like this is my way to exchange him for someone else who can have a better stat line. And assassins don't actually have the worst stats either. They're actually pretty decent.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking at them along with the bastard, and
Oh
I
yeah,
am
yeah.
intrigued with getting an assassin. I haven't done it so far in the game. Like I said, bastard is kind of those characters that I always had a negative feeling about them just because I misunderstood this event,
Mm-hmm.
and so I haven't messed with it a whole lot. But like now that I'm aware that you really don't get a negative ending to this event unless you really try to. I just feel like in the end, you're just looking at the raw stats of the bastard. I know that we talk a lot about the game. And I know that you value resolve very highly, and 20s is like, I don't like it. However, like he is in that range where it's borderline. Like if he gets 30 and above, I'm generally fine with all my brothers being at least 30. I rely heavily on my banner soldier to take care of that, and I don't feel like it really hampers my gameplay too much. And so like really the thing that I'm looking at is you do get the bad roll on the melee skill or the melee defense.
Mm-hmm.
That can be really annoying, but at the flip end you do have the high potential of 10. So I feel like in with everything said, I just think you're just getting raw stats for like potential of late game with a cheap brother. And like I said before, that's something I really value. And so I again it was kind of a last second slip into the 10th place for me,
Mm-hmm.
but it does do that for me.
And this is very true because before we started this recording, he's like, "Hold up a second, I have to take out this particular." Do you want to tell everybody? You already said it. Never mind, because it was an honorable mention. Thief was actually in his top 10 just until recent. So
Yeah.
a little bit of a backstory, a little bit of back there, but yeah, no, I think you explained it great. In Battle Brothers, it's all about the risk and reward, no matter how you look at it. You know, just like I just said. I mean, I played devil's advocate there, but I also started with, if you pull a 10 and a 5 for melee or defense and range defense, and even if this is 62, you're winning. You're winning, right? So I totally understand where you're coming from. So very good. All right, guys. So number 9 is on my list. Brawler. Number 9 is Brawler for me. Now, of course, this was in. Did you bring that up? The honorable mention. You
Yeah,
did.
it was
Yes. Thief didn't make the honorable mention. I'm not really sure now. Okay, Thief didn't. I'm sorry, my notes are a little messed up now. But either way, guys, I'm gonna roll into that. So Brawler essentially is this. Okay, most people, it seems like community would probably agree with the Brawler side of it, is just from what I've seen from forums and so on, is that Brawlers come with this potential that can be untapped. Really what you're looking for is you can get the higher health with them. You're 52 to 57, which is above average. And then, of course, you still have your average 0 to 5 in melee defense, range defense. But the fatigue is a little higher. Now, anybody who's watched the channel, you guys know I value fatigue a little bit too much probably. But it makes up for it when you're able to put a guy in decent armor right away. He's able to fight. The resolve is higher, and just as Redemption was talking about earlier, I value resolve. And so if he ends up with 40 resolve to start it out, for me, I don't have to do a lot to change that or make him better. But the other stats kind of just follows suit, right? So let's say he rolled out with 70 with his hit points, right? I can easily give him Colossus, and boom, now what is he going to be at? From 70 up, he's going to be at like 90. And that's amazing for me. I love that. I love that he can be changed however I want him to be. If I want him to be a frontliner that can tank a little bit, I can do that. If I want to have him a pole arm, I can do that. If I wanted to have him a bannerman, believe it or not, we can do it. If he pulls a 45 and I'm able to put the fortified mind and let's see here. I'm just looking out here making sure the excluded perks are he could have brave or something like that. These things he can be built out and still wear heavy gear, as you can see here. Plus, if you wanted to make him a little nimble, you could do it. Of course, he does have a higher deal of resolve. There's just more positives than negatives. The next piece of the puzzle, though, is the cost. So the cost of actually buying them, they're relatively cheap. They're right around the farmhand side. Sometimes they get a little bit more expensive, about 500 or so, about there. But the biggest thing is how much you're spending a day, right? So 13. Now, this is my kind of criteria. I wish I would have said it with the farmhands, but just remember this. Look at it as every 100 days. This is how I kind of figure out how much I'm actually spending on my brothers. So if a base is 13 and you're paying them for 100 days, that's 1,300 or 1,300 every 100 days. Now, of course, that number does go up. So for a brawler, you're actually paying daily wages early on quite high. So let's say you get 3 brawlers. Well, you're already looking at let's do the math here, 39 crowns a day. Doesn't sound like much, but you have more than 3 brothers in your group. So it's one of those things that you have to factor in. The next piece of it, cost of value, you can find these guys. It follows suit. They were really hard to differentiate between the farmhand and brawler. But the brawler has too much good upside for me to have the farmhand ahead. And ultimately, you can get these guys even later in the mid to late. You can still get these guys and be very effective, of course. I will buy them in the late game, no problem. And I've had them in the ultra late game. I've had, you can get any brother really into ultra late game. But that is really my reasoning there. Then the final thing here, of course, is events. Now, they have annoying events. The troublemaker bullying peasants and villages. I absolutely hate that. I hate that there's controversy, and most people have more than one brawler in their campaign, so they can fight and have injuries. But this is what evens them out for me, and that's the brawler teaches. Brawler teaches means that there's a brother, and you can either have them train in fatigue, health, fighting, or of course their melee defense. So, and look at these stat gains: 2 to 4 for fatigue, 2 to 4 for health, 1 to 2 for melee skill, 1 to 2 for melee defense. To me, that's huge. That's huge. And I also don't, and the final thing I didn't end up saying here is that this is excluded talents. I don't have to worry about a star accidentally ending up in range when I know I'm not going to use a brawler for a ranger. Simple, any kind of archery, I'm not going to have a brawler in. I don't get this. I don't get a brawler for that reason. So anyways, for number 9, guys, that's going to be the brawler for me. I just feel like it had to make the list as many times as I buy them in a campaign.
Yeah, and I do really like brawler. He was originally in my top 10. He's been relegated to honorable mentions. Just for me personally, it's just like, I don't think he particularly excels in anything that I truly value that another recruit can't accomplish in his place. And like, even when you're mentioning like events too, like events also hold down the brawler. Even that one that brawler teaches, I do like the event. Like, it's always really nice to get a bunch of stats for free. However, it's random, and it doesn't allow you to like check to see what brother is exactly being buffed. And so a lot of times it's about every time I don't know what brother they're actually talking about.
Okay. Yep.
And it ends up being like, I'll just throw on fatigue just because generally like fatigue is a solid good to go, or like a good go-to stat to
Right.
buff. But it's like some recruits I would like to be able to know who I'm actually training, and it's like I said, it comes up all of a sudden and it doesn't let you check. And so like even that event, I feel like the value is also kind of diminished because of that. It might be different for each person. I just know like I don't know the names of my recruits. I pretty much play nameplate off for them,
Mm-hmm.
and so that is kind of hard for me. But yeah, like again, I'm one who I don't put a high emphasis on resolve and hit points. Again, I kind of mentioned resolve earlier, but hit points as well. And I think that also plays a big role in like the brawler's value not being as high as it probably should be for me. And because of that, like I don't really necessarily care if its health is higher or not. I'm looking more at the combat, or like strictly combat, like melee defenses and fatigue. And I just feel like there's other role or other backgrounds that I'd substitute for a brawler, and I wouldn't feel like I'm missing out on anything. Or some of them I feel like are just upgrades. So that's why I can understand, like I said, it was originally in my top 10. I like the brawler and I still use them, but they aren't like a priority for me as I'm playing the game.
Right on. Very good. Yeah, I mean, I get that. I think whenever that event does happen, though, the brawler teaches, if I remember correctly, it does say who. I think it does.
It says the name. It says the name of your recruit,
Right.
and that you can't
And
like
this
go
is why
check.
you need to do the value. Make sure to name your recruits, guys. Don't just. I'm doing a separate campaign for fun, and I had 2 Caspers, and it was driving me nuts. You know about that, right? I kept yelling at one Casper, and it was a different Casper. So, either way, yeah. So, what's your number 9 then?
So this one, I think we were kind of talking about this character.
Oh, I'm curious now.
Yeah.
Oh
So
boy.
my number 9 is actually the Hedge Knight.
Whoa! Hey! Holy cow!
Yeah, and so like, don't get me wrong, I love the Hedge Knight. Everyone loves the Hedge Knight, and I mean, of course, it's probably the highest chance to being like the best recruit you have throughout the majority of your games. Um, yeah, I mean, like phenomenal stats, some of the best stats in the game, and it's generally they have like super good equipment when you buy them. They're like battle ready. They have multiple levels. They're good to go right off the bat, and all that's good. I just struggle with the risk reward factor. Again, one of the things I pay attention to is when I'm getting a late game brother, I want the best of the best. I don't want to be paying for someone who isn't going to be like the final, like I can see him being the final brother at the end of the campaign after I've done everything. Like if they're not going to fit uh, that potential, then I feel like the money isn't that well spent, because it's like there's these recruits cost so much. Hedge Knights are the most expensive in the game,
Right.
and generally most people only get one. I mean, you can do some things with the monk to get more, but usually you're just getting one Hedge Knight for most of the game. And if you get a Hedge Knight who is like the low end, it hurts so bad, or like hurts so much, because it's like you don't really want to get rid of him. You spent like 9,000, maybe even more, to purchase this brother, and at some point you're probably going to replace him with a better Hedge Knight, but like you don't want to just like throw all that money down the drain, so you get suckered into keeping them. And yeah, I just think it's hard for me to rate the Hedge Knight so highly because there is that massive risk. And you will get a good brother, don't get me wrong. The Hedge Knights will always be a good brother. But again, because I want the best of the best, if I'm going to spend that much money, I want to know that it is the permanent solution. It's hard for me to rate Hedge Knight so highly. Like, that cost is just so destructive for me. Like, I love Hedge Knights. It's one of my favorite characters. But when I'm choosing them, I am so picky because you only get a couple at most during the game. And those couple are so costly. You're just going to be like stuck with them for a while. And so, like, I guess the big thing for me is, like, cost wise, the Hedge Knight is such a massive investment that it feels bad to use when you get a medium to subpar Hedge Knight. Now, there are also the other events. They do have typically a lot of good events. They can just like bolster other people in your squad depending on who you have. So that is kind of nice. Again, I just don't think, like, some of these are dependent on the type of recruits you have in your squad, and it's just so situational that I don't really like. The events just can't make up for the cost and the risk involved with the cost. So even though I love Hedge Knight, I still think it's one of the best in the game. Because of the value that you can get all the other recruits I have above the Hedge Knight, I just couldn't put them up any higher.
Okay. Okay. So is that it, or?
Yeah, that's
okay. Sorry, wasn't sure if there was more coming. There was a lot of suspense going on there. Okay. So obviously this one made my list, and it's a little bit. It's not a little bit. It's higher. It's not high, but it's higher. It's definitely higher.
yeah.
But tell me this: any campaign that you're going over 100 days, do you ever purposely look for a Hedge Knight?
Yeah, I do. Again,
have you ever had a campaign where you didn't have a Hedge Knight, providing you went later game?
I think I'd be hard pressed to find one that I didn't.
Okay. Well, the fact that it's on your top 10, to me, that's fine. The fact that you're telling me that you would buy, like, when you go to a town and you look through recruits, I'd be hard pressed to believe that if you played the game long enough, you wouldn't at least notice the Hedge Knight right away, right? To me, I always am like, oh, there's a Hedge Knight in this town, right? And It's like, I could never afford them at the time that I, like, obviously noted. It could be the second day and I walk into a village and holy crap, there's a Hedge Knight. This is sweet. It doesn't matter, right? It's like looking at a famed item and saying, man, wow. Nice and shiny. But you look at that price tag and of course it goes wild. So I think what you're saying is completely noted, right? So I don't really have I'm just surprised it's at 9. I was actually, because, so you guys know the little bit here is Redemption and I talk very often. Okay, we're actually, no surprise, you're going to find this out. I'm PuggoReborn, he's PuggoRedemption, we're brothers. So we've been playing this game for a while separately, but I'm just very surprised. At any rate, you knew it too because of the way you started that. Yeah. So.
There was at some point you were like, when will I be surprised?
Right.
I was like, you're going to be surprised really
right away. Yeah.
I think this was going to be probably one of the more controversial ones that I had.
Oh, for sure. Well, just from between our talks and stuff. So, all right, guys. Well, let's move on here. Let's keep this thing rolling here. Number 8, this one's going to shock the tar out of you here. I guarantee this because of our talk in the last few days. But, so my number 8 is... I'm actually looking for it on here. I don't see... Oh, there it is. Raider. Raider is my number 8. Okay, again, Raider is my number 8. And this is going to come to a shock, and I'm going to explain it to you, Redemption, because I have been leading him astray. Not on purpose, actually. Today, I finally threw him into the fray. And this is why. First off, let's look at the stats here. Really, he's absolute middle of the road in terms of his health. He has a higher potential in terms of his melee skill than a Hedge Knight, but has the top end potential as a Hedge Knight. So that is very, 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 very enticing. And of course, his defense is anywhere. It doesn't matter who you buy, which one you buy. It's going to be 6 to 10 on each range and melee defense. Of course, fatigue is 92 to 100, so it's a little bit above average. Average is 90 to 100, and then of course you get a little bit of a downgrade, boo-hoo, right, on resolve. Now, resolve for me is a big deal. 30 to 37 does not seem very appealing, but this is my point with all the stats here. He can be whatever he wants to be. That's the beauty of it. He is a beast. If you buy this guy, well, I'm just going to segue right into cost on this part. I don't need to go over really the stats farther because it's all right there. The only negative is in resolve, but most of the stuff that you're going to find with a Raider is very good in terms of the stats. The actual price tag on them is going to be like you can get them pretty dang cheap. In all honesty, the one that I found was 27. What was the other one the other day was like 2,700. Otherwise, they can range up to almost 6,000, right?
Yeah.
So you can. What's that?
I generally see them at like 4,000. I rarely ever see them any cheaper.
Right, but and that right there, that price tag. So you got a price tag that's lower. You can find them pretty dang cheap for a third tier unit. And of course, this is the next part of the piece of the puzzle. And again, I do a metric of 100 days off of this total right here. So if he's 28, if the base of him is going to be 28 crowns a day, and granted it ranges, and I understand that, so does everybody else. The sellsword is going to be the one that demands more and more and more and more and more and more coins, and he starts out at 35 as his base. Now, if the Raiders is lower and has the same stats that are very, very similar stats to the Hedge Knight, based not including the hit points, not including the resolve, and not including the fatigue. I get it. It's like a poor man's still really good Hedge Knight at a very, very affordable cost. But you might be asking yourself, well, if you're paying 2,800 every 100 days, and granted that goes up 3,500, let's just say at level 7, why was there any kind of controversy before this? Well, this is simply put. You can get them. Well, actually, hold on. Before I actually say that, sorry. Actually, I'm going to keep doing that. I forgot the cost of value. You can get them in the mid game, guys. You can get them early. You have 5,000 crowns at your disposal, and at let's say day 30 to day 50, right? Let's just say somewhere in there you get a bounty. You get the golden goose even. You sell that bad boy, and there's a Raider sitting there. He could be your next level template guy. However, this is the killer. I've always in some part despised Raiders. And the biggest reason for that is because Raiders have the worst events that I can come to find. You might buy it in the middle round or the middle area, 30 to 60 days, 30 to 90 days, up to 100 days, right? You buy him, and you get a good cost, you get a good brother, but you have the lawman after you. So, and it can proc multiple times. I've had it where I bought I remember a thief I had for like 15 days, and they had the lawman after me already. And it's like, I'm not going to sacrifice 1,500 crowns, or I'm not going to fight a house that I am actually fighting for, or make an enemy doing this. This is one of the most annoying things to happen within 100 days. The next piece of the puzzle is, if you have a Hedge Knight Raider, that's always good. But if you have a caravan, I feel like a lot of people invest in caravans. If you have a refugee, there's an unknown event. I think it's they fight or something, or there's some kind of disagreement. But causing trouble in town. I've had this happen time and time again. And then, of course, bullying peasants. So pretty much everywhere you go, you're just going to piss people off. It's not always a guaranteed thing. It doesn't happen all the time. But man, oh man, it's the risk of when it does happen. If I'm playing in the late game, if I'm over 100 days, if I'm at 200 days, my renown's really looking good. There's a point when you get to a certain amount of renown, you can make the lawmen just run away. Like, they're just like, don't make this happen, don't let this happen again, and then they leave because the men are running away from you. I'm just like, there is so much risk, but at the same time, if that does not bother you guys at all, maybe I convince you to check out the Raider, because today I just, my heart of cards came out and I was like, you know what, at the end of the day, this is an amazing brother at a very amazing cost compared to like your hedge knight that is 9,000 to 16,000 crowns. So yeah, the investment makes sense. So that's why the Raider snuck in at number 8.
Yeah, I can totally understand. Like, it's one of those, like, you really want the cookie, but at the same time, you know it's not probably the best for you. And so it's like, that's how I feel about it. Is
All sugar.
I love the Raiders stats. Like, the Raiders stats, I'm with you. It has probably one of the best stats in the game. The events just really kill it for me. And so, like, we kind of talked about time of value. Like, you can get this Raider, like, relatively early on. I think you're shooting yourself in the foot if you do that. Like, just because of the events, and particularly the lawman event, that one is, I think we can both agree, like, the worst event.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're not to the point where you can consistently, like, look past that, like, you can avoid the negative effects of that event, I think that's the point in which you can finally start to look at picking up a Raider. But I think it pushes back that point in time when you should be able to purchase him. And so, like, yeah, like, the cost wise, you can afford him earlier in the game, or maybe not earlier, but like mid to late game, you can afford him. Is it wise to do it? I don't think it is, especially, like, for me. I just never feel like the negative offense, I think there's too much bad coming from the negative events that it's like, I don't usually get to the point where I'm buying Raiders generally in my games, just because it's so late game that I feel like I'm fine grabbing them, that I don't know, I just, like, their value just feels like it's so much diminished just because you really have to wait a long time to really start picking them up, even though it feels like you should be able to. Like, the game is asking you to pick them up
Right.
early
Oh
on.
yeah, no, it's a ploy. Overhype has always made this. They make things enticing. It's and half the time it's fool's gold. But I mean, to that point, really, it's guys. At the end of the day, it's gonna be everything you do in these lists. There's some sort of risk reward. Obviously, as we get to the very top, there's gonna be more minimal risk. But but that's why it's snuck in, is because if you can swing this where you get a Raider and you can somehow, if you can blow the 1,500 crowns that they're asking for, and you can just be like, you know what, at the end of the day, this guy is going to be the head of the company until we get whatever, until something else comes along. That's why I put him in the list. So, but yeah, you're 100% right about the lawman. So, all right. So with that, what is your number 8?
My number 8, and this is something that I have been talking with you a little bit. You probably know where I'm going with this already. And it is the Retired Soldier.
Oh, okay. I didn't see that coming. I didn't.
Yeah, this is something that originally, when we first started talking, like, hey, we should do a video on this, it was top 7 best recruit or most valuable recruits and top 7 least valuable recruits. Retired Soldier, I immediately pulled him up for the least valuable recruit. I just felt this was another background where I just had a very negative stigma of. But then it was like, when I was looking at him, trying to decide why would he be on my least valuable list, I all of a sudden started looking at him and, oh boy, this guy's got nutty stats, like really good stats. I mean, like 60 to 67 melee chance, like that is upper echelons. I think that's actually, let me pull up
That
Hedge
might
Knight. Yeah,
be
that's more reliable than Hedge Knights.
the only thing on par. I think is, let me just go to it real quick. Yeah, the only thing on par is the Cell Sword. So
Yeah, like the
yeah.
Hedge Knight doesn't even keep up with a retired soldier in defense, melee,
And I forgot
and
real quick, Master Swords or Sword Master was the other one I was thinking. There,
oh
that's the top, obviously. But sorry, go ahead, keep
yeah.
going, keep going.
Yeah, and so like retired soldier is absolutely stacked. I already mentioned the hit points, that I'm not all that concerned. I think the retired soldier does have an issue in hit points. You are going to have to put some points into it. I generally try and cheat and just throw what's it called, Colossus on my retired soldiers, get them to at least 50, and I'm like, all right, that's good. But the most notable thing, of course, is the fatigue. And so I know Shadow or Puggo and I, we both really don't, or like, we really value fatigue. And looking at a retired soldier, it is heartbreaking to see like such low fatigue. But I'm looking at it as though like you have the perfect brother for like top tier stats for very cheap, and you can slot them into roles that don't need fatigue. I'm thinking like duelists, bannerman, like he has great resolve. I mean, he could easily be a bannerman. You have duelists, bannerman, you have backliners, so I'm thinking more like polearm users, and I just feel like those roles, retired soldier is perfect for it. I think he is late game, like top tier late game potential with these stats, like in melee defenses, and you can put him on a role that doesn't require fatigue, and I think you're golden. Like, it is absurd how stacked this character is with its stats, and when you make it that fatigue doesn't even matter, then you just have a top tier recruit. There's no other way around it. I just think I can't talk them up enough in terms of their stats. They're just so good. And again, I kind of hinted at this, but they're also extremely cheap. Like, you'll buy them for around 2,000 upfront cost. You have the 15 daily wage. That's not much more than a brawler, for instance. You get a couple levels to start off, or like as a bonus, and you also get decent gear to start off with. Yeah, maybe later on the gear doesn't matter. Like, it's not the best gear, but it's still like decent gear. Like, if you were to pick him up early, it's serviceable gear. And so like this has been something that I've been so hyped on recently, now that I've like realized the potential of the retired soldiers. Again, I was thinking that they were going to be in my least favorite. And one of the reasons I thought that was particularly because I thought retired soldiers like sword masters could get old. And I did some research, because like I didn't see it in here that they can get old. And so I was kind of confused by that, because I always had that impression that it's a retired soldier. You have like the cobwebs on the sword. If there's going to be an old trait, you feel like it has to be affecting retired soldiers. But I'm looking everywhere, and in my gameplay, I have not ever had a retired soldier get old. And
Yep. No, I'm just agreeing.
the reason
Sorry.
why, or on to the point that it was in my least valued recruits, but like that, the old trait or whatever, the old trait, as far as I know and as far as I can find, it doesn't actually affect them. So in the end, you just have top tier stat recruit sacrificing a little bit of health that you can fix up in just a couple of levels or a perk, which if I'm using him backline and whatnot, I feel like I have a lot of perks that I can afford to just slap on Colossus anyways. And you just put him in a role that doesn't require fatigue and you have top tier stats. So that's why he made number 8 for me. And honestly, like I said, he's my dark horse.
Oh, so this is your dark horse. Here we go. I forgot to let you guys know we are doing dark horse. Who is our dark horse out of these recruits? Because this is one that I would have never have given this much attention to. And I respect you for actually putting him there because I see exactly where you're coming from. I do have some questions for you though. I mean, I don't know if you had something else you want to say, but
well, yeah, he's my dark horse. The reason, like again, you slot him into specific roles, and he can be top class in those roles. Again, like I said, I'm thinking Bannerman, backliner / polearm user, and duelist. I just think it's so crazy how high stats, and I can work with that fatigue knowing that he'll fit into those roles. That's the reason why he's kind of low on my list and a dark horse, or like why he would be a dark horse is because yeah, he has great stats, but because the fatigue and health are so low, it's like he really can't like fit many other roles. Like he's never going to be like a frontliner and whatnot, or a reliable frontliner. It's just that fatigue is just so bad, so bad.
Unless he got 3 stars, right? Come on now, give him a little love.
Again, I think it's something that why. Let's put it this way. You got. Hold on here. There's a bug trying to encroach on my computer here, but I'm thinking, where is the best place to put the points? He has such bad fatigue that I feel like it's a waste to try and make up for that bad fatigue. I think you should focus on his strengths and put him in a position where the fatigue just doesn't matter. Like he can have the worst fatigue in the game, but if you put him in a position that like requires no fatigue, then what does it matter? I'm thinking you should like forget the fatigue, put him in a position that doesn't matter, and focus on what he's good at, and that's his combat stats in terms of melee skill and defenses. Or you can even talk about resolve. He's also top tier for resolve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess you pretty much answered my side of it. I mean, I personally, I look at him and I say, health to me or hit points to me, every brother should be at 60 when it's all said and done. And I think that's possible, obviously, with Colossus. You throw Colossus on him, even if he's at 50, he rolls a 4, you throw that 4 in there, 2 4s, whatever, boom, he's there. But the fatigue is such a killer for me. However, when I look at his defense, I look at his attack, and I look at the resolve. He is the perfect bannerman to be, or even just a backliner in general, or like you said, to your point of a duelist. Oh, excuse me. You go nimble. You go. I mean, even if you could get some good, I can't even think of what I'm trying to say. If you get some good armor and whatnot that you can throw on him, he could be very good. You did change my opinion a little bit of how I view him. I didn't realize his stats were actually so stacked in certain areas. So yeah, that's a good. That's really good.
Yeah, I do have to say, if you do duelist though, I am looking for stars in the hit points, just because again, you're not going to be doing the heavy armor perk. I can't remember, Battle Forge, sure. You are doing the nimble build, and so like of course nimble scales with health, and so I just slapping Colossus on him isn't enough if you do the nimble build. But say you do get a lot of stars or like a high talent in hit points, like I feel like he is very worthy of being a duelist. And again, top tier melee, or like just like combat stats. Like he is one of the best if not, you can maybe slot him as the best in the game for raw stats in the combat.
Mm.
I'll have to probably look at Sellsword, but yeah, it's pretty nutty.
Yeah. All right, well, very good. I like it. I mean, like I say, it's a unique, definitely a unique slot, and I would not have seen that. But yeah, it was very good points. So, moving on to number 7. Number 7 for me, this is going to be, I don't even know if this is going to be a surprise to you or not. We'll see. But it is going to be Wildmen. So Wildmen come in at number 7 for several different reasons. Something I've found with them, at least through their stats, is you get high health, you have above average melee in terms of 53 to 57. Now, this is where it gets a little, this is where it gets shaky. I'm not even going to hide it from you. -5 to 5 in terms of melee defense, -5 range defense to 0. So you have the potential of having -5, -5, -2, -2, -2, or negative, or actually 5 to -5. There is a range there, and I'm sure most people have found that range. And then you get into the big reason why he matters to me. These two next reasons, and that's crazy. This is the highest, I think, of any brother in the game in terms of fatigue, and that's, you have the +18 to +23 extra fatigue. This is top echelons of fatigue. And then you have, of course, 42 to 50 resolve. And from there, I don't really care about initiative personally. So here's my thought on this. With that being condensed, and I'm actually going to put his little special thing on him too. Being a Wildman, you have -15% XP. That to me doesn't actually bother me, because if you're willing to spend the first perk on student, you actually are getting a plus 5% every level, through every level, and then by the time you get to level 11, you'll have 2 perk points you can use. So it's almost as if he never had this trait in the first place, but you have to survive through the first few levels for that to really add up. Now, on the flip side here, this is the thing. I look at a Wildman and this is where I got to go into kind of the build, is you can make them amazing duelists. Okay, you can throw the heaviest armor on these guys and still have so much fatigue. If you find one of these bad boys with three stars in fatigue, good night. I can make a mega tank out of this guy. I can sit there and I can use shield wall if I wanted to, but the more important one I can use is Indomitable. I can sit there and proc that non-stop, and constantly use that all the way through and just tank out whoever it is in front of me. I can use him. I can give him Colossus, so he'll have a stupid amount of hit points. If you wanted to, you could still make him a nimble build with such high hit points there. Yeah, if you get any stars in melee, the thing that I've noticed the most is when you have brothers with insane amount of armor, archers do not focus heavily on them. They will at some point. They'll take shots. Of course, they'll pot shot them. But for the most part, they will make their attempts on somebody else. And if you have Battleforge on top of that, Battleforge with 350 armor, let's just say, or per head or per body, and whatever you have for your head, it's going to take so much of the damage away, even with Indomitable, that what are they going to do? Like, at some point, you're so minuscule. The damage that's coming into you is so minuscule to your armor, then to your health. It's insane. Some of my best builds have been through Wildmen in terms of single-handed weapons, because most of the time I don't seem to make Wildmen get over well over the 80s into the 90s. Like, it just doesn't seem to happen very often because I haven't gotten as lucky with the stars in that spot. However, being that they're in the 80s, that is game time for two-handed cleavers being able to attack twice. It's game time for Warbrand at certain points, but more importantly, again, the duelist-esque type of builds. Now, in terms of the actual crowns, it really ranges. I've seen them at 600 crowns. I've seen them at about 2,000, I'd say, and maybe even more. I'm trying to remember exactly, because it does depend on the gear that they've had. These are the characters you buy also, because then you can get the man splitter, which is insane for damage. Of course, it's its own famed weapon in itself. But yeah, so, and then of course the crowns aren't crazy. It's less than a brawler even, so you can put that in perspective. However, the events, the final thing with these guys, actually no, let me go one more thing here. The cost of value throughout the whole game, you might have to spend a little extra to get one of these bad boys, but if you have some gear that you can't quite fit on somebody else, you can fit on him. And in the ultra late game, or even late ultra late game, I've been able to pull some really good wildmen that, yeah, I had to sit at the back line to start, but once I got to level 6 and higher, it was like, I don't know, the sky was the limit, it felt like, for most wildmen that I've had. Now again, they do have some up and down events. Go Wild in Town, that one happens pretty often, honestly, destroying things that you can piss off people. You have to pay 600 crowns or suffer the consequences where he has to help. He gets a bad mood. Various items in the forest, you can get stuff there. Offer shrooms, are mushrooms, berries, flowers. There's random different things that can happen. He can scare off unholds or get hurt. That's a big one that you can only get with beast hunters or beast slayers. Otherwise, you gain another wildman from imprisonment, so you could actually gain another one, taking crowns away. You can actually lower his cost, I think, as a whole, which is pretty cool, and can get a good mood from wild dog sounds. So yeah, and then look at all these excluded traits. Now, there are some bad ones and there's some really good ones. I hate cocky, that one's gone. Dastard is gone. Can't get asthmatic. He can't be a drunkard. Y'all know that is. I hate drunkard. He can't be gluttonous. I hate gluttonous. He can't ask for more crowns. He doesn't get greedy. He's not insecure. He's not optimistic. He's not paranoid. There's so many freaking perks that drive me up a wall that he does not get. There is and if you look at all these traits, guys, remember, with all these traits off the board, you have a greater chance of getting iron lungs. Or not iron lungs, what's the trait? It's iron
lungs.
It is iron lungs? Yeah, it is iron lungs. What's the perk? I'm trying to think of the perk then. I can't think of the perk all of a sudden. But either ways, guys, you guys know iron lungs. You have a great chance of getting iron lungs, which just continuously makes him an absolute beast. And that is why he ended up getting number 7. Let me give some down. I did end up talking forever about, he's so great. But the truth of the matter is, guys, if you end up pulling a 53, a -5 right across the board, on melee range and melee defense, and even a low end, I mean, you can really whiff. And in early game, as enticing as these guys are, they are a target for even poachers, and that's why I struggle to put them any higher than this. I feel like this is they have a huge reward, but there is a crown risk early on, so that's why I have him where he's at.
Yeah, I don't know. Ever since the nerf, I don't know how far back it was, where they raised the prices of wildmen, I never even touched wildmen since. Like, prior to that nerf, yes, wildman was my go-to character, like, just purely because of that fatigue. Like, it's so awesome. However, nowadays it's just like, I just don't like wildmen anymore, and the big reason is, like, I'm really wondering, what are your thoughts on wildmen compared to farmhand?
Well, I mean, in terms of farmhand, their highest chance is 0 to 5 in terms of the melee defense and range defense. However, I have a better chance at getting a higher melee skill and a better chance at a much higher fatigue and, of course, resolve. Because, again, those 3 things in itself, or those 4 things in itself, matter so much to me. For farmhands, you get a -5. I believe it's -5. Or no, a -2 to -3 chance. So you'll never hit that 40. And if I get a guy at 42, I might never need to put more resolve in unless everything else doesn't align correctly. And plus, I don't, when you look at a farmhand, the low end is 100, which is still really great. Don't get me wrong, but the Wildman has the upper echelons of. I mean, it's the top of the top, and I look at if I get to level 11, I think I can do more with a Wildman in terms of armor and tankiness than I can with a farmhand. Not to say I haven't done it before, but I feel like I have a better outcome of possibility with a Wildman.
Yeah.
And
I don't know.
And one more thing too. Again, I can't say enough about these traits. Really look at the traits. Look at the stack of traits that you can't get with the Wildman. There's so many. There's way more good traits than there are bad that he can get. So that compared to the farmhand.
I did think that was a good point that I wasn't even tracking on. Yeah, that is a good point about the potential for good traits on a Wildman. I don't know. I'm not. I guess I'm not sold. You can get a farmhand, like the cheap end of Wildman. I can see you getting like 600, like you said. Farmhand, that's like 6 farmhands, and they're all about the same stats. I get the resolve. I can understand where like you in particular like having that 40 line for resolve, and whereas like my line is like 30 and I'm good, and so that does make sense. I think you're like penny pinching almost to get to from farmhand to Wildman. Yeah, Wildman in the end have the best chance of being like the final character that you can use in the late game, but I think farmhand is a lot more cheaper and more like available on hand than Wildman, as well as you don't that whole like negative 15% experience. Yeah, in the long run it doesn't really matter, you'll get there eventually, but like to have to buy a perk to make up for it.
But you're not really buying. But that's the thing. I don't. Not to totally cut you off, but I don't think that I'm burning a perk by doing that. I'm gaining 5% XP, and when I get to level 11, I get 2 perk points to allocate wherever they need to be. And the reason I like 2 perk points at 11 is because when I get to a level 11, I can see what the final product actually looks like. And instead of me choosing something at level 1 that ultimately didn't fit the Wildman, let's say I did have a 57 at melee and I got to excuse me guys, but let's say I got to level 11 and I could only get it up to 70, right? And I had that extra perk point, I would be much more inclined to go, depending on how the table ran, to go and get Backstabber at this point, because I knew that now he's only going to be a tank, and he's either a backup or he's going to be a brother that needs that little bit of help in the middle, causing the damage. So that's why I don't look at it as a loss at all, unless you want to drive it out, which I'm sure most people do. They'll drive it out with that negative 15% XP. You'll get there eventually, but it is a long haul of getting beaten up through a course of who knows how long. So I just want to say that, because I don't think it's a loss, personally. I don't see it a loss at all, as long as you pick student.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, I think that's a fair point.
Yeah. All right. So then, guys, I'm going to pause just 1 second here, and then we'll get on to number 7.
Okay, so getting on to number 7, I have the Hunter as my number 7. Hunters are generally pretty cheap, and like for a late game, like you are looking for that the archer out of the Hunter class, and so usually with a lot of late game recruits, they're expensive, but the Hunter is kind of middle of the road, so it's not too bad. Solid stats, and I'm just gonna put it out there.
Hang on 1 second here. I don't know why. There it is. I was trying to find the Hunter to pull him up, and I just got it. Okay, so keep going. Sorry.
Okay.
I apologize, guys. That's on me.
One of the things kind of mentioned in our criteria is like some recruits will fill a certain role, and that role may have like pretty big effects on why we'd rank a recruit higher or lower. And for me, like, we're talking about the archer. Like, archers are so powerful in this game. And when you're looking for an archer, again, this isn't even just me at this point. I know like pretty much everywhere I've looked, everyone wants the best tier archer, the one that can shoot into a group of enemies, find that primary target, and be able to reliably hit them. And so like you're looking for the best of the best of the archers, and I don't think any other class really comes close to the hunter. If you want the best of the best, it has to be the hunter. And so really, like, when I'm looking for archers, I never look at any other class. Like, hunter is the archer class for me, and anyone else who like comes sort of close is just always going to be subpar to the hunter, I feel. And so like, again, because this is the only background where you can truly get the best of the best archer, I had to rank it very highly. I know early on it was even higher in my list, but like the stats don't necessarily scream out to me with a hunter, and that's something that it makes it hard, because it's like really it does fill that one role, but even then like its stats aren't like up there. It's just because it's so essential that it makes it up here on at the number 7 spot for me on my list. Generally I don't necessarily care about the moods or the events, but like you can see it, there's a lot of good events just constantly with the hunters, so that's just more of a bonus for me. But yeah, I think hunter, just because it's so essential for the archer role in the game, that's the reason why it made it up to number 7.
Yeah, I have nothing really to add to that, and you'll understand in a second here. Besides, well, the only yeah, so great job. Well, I'm gonna with that. Is that all you want to say?
Yeah, that's all I need to say.
Okay, well, let's get into number 6 then. All right, so number 6, let's go to the backgrounds. Oh, hey, we're there. For me, number 6 is the hunter. So I'm actually happy that we were very close. I struggled originally. Hunter was at number 7, but there was some criteria issue. Here's the deal, guys. This is gonna fall in line with the monk in a sense, just to kind of piggyback off of what Redemption was saying there. So pretty much this: these guys are archers. That's it. They're archers. If you don't make them an archer, the best case scenario for them, other than that, is that they didn't get any stars in range, but they pulled in a 59, and you have a 57 with 2 stars in it. And I say that because you can have a pole arm with an axe thrower or a javelin thrower, a throwing weapon mastery of sorts to add to that. They come with 8 range defense, which they can get up to 8 range defense, which is just fantastic, right? Because you need that. You need that for your ranged units. But there's nothing else that comes close to this. The closest, I think, is the sellsword. I'm going to swing over to it real quick. Yeah, sellsword gets to 52. The next one would probably be Beastslayer, I think. 49. Yeah, that doesn't make it. I know the hunter goes to 50. The poacher is under at 49. Let's see here. I'm just trying to think. Yeah, see, like the juggler doesn't even get there. I'm trying to think of what else really. There's nothing that gets to that 59 mark or even closer. Don't even get me started with the boyar. The boyar does get to 52, so I guess you can throw that one as well. Not to say, I'm sure that's going to end up in some sort of list, right? Not to say which list. But either way, yeah, so hunter definitely makes the mark for me. Like, to Redemption's points as well. Good, you get a lot of good events as well. The cost of them, it doesn't matter the cost, right? You get 4 of these guys. Sometimes you get 1, but I'm pretty picky. Redemption, we've talked about it. You're really picky about it too, which kind of makes it tough because you're investing in these things. Some of these guys can cost quite a bit, and at 20 crowns to start as a starter, Yeah, that's a rough call. Now, where I'm going to tie one last thing, I'm going to tie in with the monks, guys. I really wanted monks to make this list, but for me, I only get one of them. And sometimes with the hunter, you end up with at least two. You can get up to four, but it's, for me, I feel like sometimes I get restricted to a certain amount. And you're going to find out why as my number 5, why that happens. But without further ado, guys, that's my number 6. So Puggo, Puggo. See, here we go. PuggoRedemption. What is your number 6 then?
My number 6 is the Lumberjack.
Oh.
So, yeah. Lumberjack, I don't really know. It's just, he is like the solid brother for frontlining. Like, for me, like when I look at him, good solid stats for melee, health, and fatigue. Fatigue is like the big one. Like the melee and fatigue are great on Lumberjack. It's like no matter what the early game units, Lumberjack is like the perfect upgrade to all of them. And he's even not that cheap. Like even though he is like the next tier, kind of like that middle of the pack recruits, he isn't that expensive. I've seen them underneath 1,000 to pick up, and their daily wage is 13. What is that, like pretty much a brawler? Like,
yeah, it's a brawler.
Yeah, I just think, again, even like brawler, we could look at brawler. I think he's just a better brawler. For instance, he's just so solid in his stats, and you get some good talents on him. He could be a great late game recruit. So that's really all I have to say. I don't really pay attention to events on him. I just think he is a purely solid stat character in the game for relatively cheap.
Yeah, no, I for that, to that point, I think that Lumberjack, I don't want to get too much into it because I have a special place in my heart for these guys. But yeah, I mean, the only thing I'm going to add to this is they have not only like the good events, but some of these excluded traits follow suit too. You have a lot of ones that can diminish brothers. He's not going to have a morale check when it comes to his resolve. The only one that he can that does is the
superstitious.
Superstitious. Well, okay, take that back. So there is superstitious. I forgot about that one. But there's superstitious, there's pessimist, and what was the other one that's in between? Like it's a random morale thing. They can be.
It's I know it's like unstable, but it's the glass thing. It's just tilting.
Yeah, right. So yeah, I mean, so there are some odd traits. There's some bad traits. You know, he can be drunkard. He can be gluttonous and stuff like that. So that does fall in line. But ultimately, yes, I do agree with you. As an upgrade, it's almost like I don't know. There's Mario and then there's Super Mario, right? And I feel like he becomes the Super Mario of a brawler without any bad effects.
Yeah.
So that's my opinion. Just a base opinion. So very good.
Good. Number 6 for me.
Yeah. Okay, so number 5. Number 5 is the Beast Slayer for me. Now, guys, this is sick. Unless you haven't seen these, I honestly don't know how the community values Beast Slayers, and it was very hard for me not to put them higher on this list. Because when I actually dove in and saw, we did the Beast Slayer campaign, the Beast Ledger, as you all know. The Beast Ledgers, they were amazing. Granted, the Legends mod does kind of hype things up a bit more. There's some bigger stats that you can get. But guys, you can make them nimble. You can make them a bannerman. You can make their fatigue is above average. So you can make them the frontliner. They don't have any there's nothing negative to them. Their cost can get higher, but I'm going to stick to the traits a little bit more here. So if we go into like the health you can get a +3, you can get up to 63, so that's a little bit above average. And the melee, you can get up to 62 in melee. Like, I mean, that's if we're there's like, what would you call that? Superb, excellent, very good, good. I mean, I'm putting him at excellent because 62 is one of those higher, the higher range. And speaking of range, these guys can make great archers. If you can pull one of these. Now, I'm saying great archers off the standpoint that you pull a 3-star. If you at 49, that is the lower end. That's a poacher, but you can still use a great mix between polearm and throw. Like for me, I love using throwing weapons. So they follow so well suit in the throwing weapons department. That's one of my specialties. That's one of the things I absolutely love. So that's why I love Beast Slayers, because there's so many multi-classing that you can do. You can make them whatever you want to make them. There's nothing negative. Even when you get to their events, scare away unholds. Worst case, you get a broken something, broken nose. Has a chance to remove ailing trait. That's the one where you bleed more. You can get rid of that. Capturing an elk, you can kill it. What's that?
Ailing is poison.
Yeah, I know. It's technically, yeah, right. It's the ailing part. I'm just saying it's instead if you have like an extra turn for bleeding or poison or whatever. Yeah, that's the trait that it ends up taking away. I think it's somewhere in here.
Yeah, it's the first one.
Yeah, this one right here. Or bleeder it is. Or ailing. Never mind, you're right. Ailing is for poison. I didn't even realize that. So yeah, so ailing, yes, it takes away the poison side of it, right? So either way, you can take away something. You can kill an elk, get money, whatever, gain a mood boost for the youngling elk. You have get a chance to get a golden chalice with a dog. I mean, corpse in the swamp. You gain poison oil. There's just so much. You can get some venison in the forest, the hunt for food, and then finally the wild dog sounds. You get a cured venison, and you get a +1 resolve. Guys, it's like, this is such a sure shot, brother. The only reason that I don't have them any higher is because the number one reason they didn't go any higher, the one thing that held me back from it, is ultimately you don't find a lot of them, and when you do, sometimes it's where's your need. I can use these guys as archers if I come across the right one. And if you get a low end, I mean, you could pull a low end really crap Beast Slayer. Always just take out all the high end stuff, and you see a guy who's 50 health, 52 melee, 43 range, 0 in any department defense, and so on. It's always going to be risk reward, but I really see a high reward if I come across them at the right time for the right price, because you really don't see them really cheap. I think the cheapest I've ever seen them was oh man, and I could be wrong, it was like 1700, but that is still pretty high depending on where you're at in the game, and they do follow suit all the way into the ultra late game. So yeah, that's why I love them at 5.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm actually going to go on to my number 5, and then I'll put on some input. Okay. My number 5 was also Beast Slayer.
Oh, hey.
Yeah. Pretty much everything you said. There are a couple things, you kind of mentioned at the end, is the price. Beast Slayers aren't that expensive. Yeah, you can get lumberjacks for a little bit cheaper, but like mid-tier, generally all the Beast Slayers I see are, for the most part, they sit pretty much at that 2,000 gold range to purchase, and so that's not much at all for like the wild potential that Beast Slayers have. Like great stats all the way across the board. Well, like you can argue about the defenses that they're pretty much the same as always, but like
nitpicking.
Everything else is that's literally nitpicking. I mean, everything else is great. Like there is no other way around it. You have a bunch of great events. He's pretty above average in pretty much everything. So I think for a relatively cheap recruit, you can get a really great brother out of a Beast Slayer relatively easily.
With everything you said, I didn't hear a real con. So why number 5?
The only con was nitpicking. Like, so for me, I just feel like they're a little bit above lumberjack, and so like I was originally trying to decide whether I like the fatigue with Lumberjack more than I like the boost in stats from Beast Slayer. I mean, again, I don't really care too much about health. You can also like say Lumberjack gets more health, but like the absurd resolve, if you ever did want to use throwing weapons, it's readily available with Beast Slayers. You have the higher potential for melee skill, and then you still have good fatigue. Like compared to a lot of recruits in the game, Beast Slayer has above average, and that's even true regarding the late end game recruits, say like sellswords, adventurous nobles, and such like that. They generally don't even reach this fatigue. They're generally like 90 to 100, and so like he's already above, like good in the fatigue department. And then again, throwing the event, like he's just the versatility and like the cheap potential of Beast Slayer is just, that's why he makes it above Lumberjack and above all the other recruits that I haven't really mentioned yet. There's like when you get to the top 5 for me, I think you're going to find a big pattern is I'm looking at cost effectiveness or cost efficiency. And so that's where I think you can very well make a case that Beast Slayer could be even higher on the list for amongst all the recruits because there is a lot of cost efficiency. However, I just feel like my top 4, I don't see Beast Slayer taking the place of any of them. So like he's 5 because the top 4 I just don't, he doesn't beat out any of them, and then 5 because he's clearly better than the 6, and there's a reason why.
All right, I get it. You're going in circles here on that one. It's it's how you value. Obviously, you value 1 through 4 more than this one. But
Yeah.
you can't tell me why because obviously we haven't gotten to them. I get that. I get that part. So, all right. Yeah. Well, we'll keep going then. So here we go. So in my number 4, is, and I'm gonna pop down here. Boom! It's the Lumberjack. So I'm doing a little bit of a hopscotch around. We're kind of reversing the roles here on this. And ultimately, this is what it is, guys. No negative. I'm going to start with the stats here. The stats. You have the potential at 70. You're going to have high health. You're getting the above average 52 to 57. Your defense and stuff, whatever. Nothing negative that really matters here. I mean, the health, or not the health, the fatigue, 10 to 15 over. Like this is where we're getting into the territory of very good, almost excellent, right? You can get a very well quality brother off of the Lumberjack, and then of course the resolve 30 to 45, right where I personally like it. When I look at a Lumberjack and I start doing the real comparisons here, this is what it comes down to. You can compare it to the Brawler, but the Brawler has a lot of negative events. This guy, the Lumberjack, doesn't have any negative events, right? You can compare it to the Brawler in terms of, because I feel like that's one of the big things. You can compare it to the Brawler because of fatigue. Well, if we get to the fatigue side of it, the Lumberjack actually comes out with more. It comes out with more fatigue because the Brawler goes from 100 to 105. Again, if I go back, because I'm having trouble skipping around here. You're gonna get better there. You're gonna have the same as resolve. The actual melee skill I think is exactly the same if I'm correct. Yes, it is the same. And then finally the health. I have a higher potential to get to 70 than the Brawler does, whereas the Brawler could fall at 55. But again, there's nothing negative here. The crowns that you're gonna get is the same. And I've had, part of my reason on this is I've had so many Lumberjacks in the past where I've found them at a cost of 400 crowns. I've found them at a cost of 12 to 14, I believe. But yeah, so really, when it all comes full circle, this is my Dark Horse character. You might look at him and say, well, you know, why would you blow the crowns on this brother? Because you don't see him as often unless you're in like the forest or whatever, forest town, or maybe you say, well, you know, the brawler has, I don't know, has his own potential here. However you view it, this is one of the ones that just stands out with, I don't have to worry about a bad event. I don't have to worry about not getting, like, the stats not rolling in my favor, because everything that's here is a frontliner for me, and that little extra in resolve. I just feel like it has more value at the end of it all. And plus some of these negative traits, a lot of these negative traits being gone matters a lot in the same respect. So that's why the Lumberjack took that. Oh, one more thing. I forgot this last thing I didn't end up getting into. While he doesn't have the same fatigue as a Wildman, it might be a question as why not Wildman instead, but ultimately I don't have to worry about the trait, so I don't have to use, granted it's not the end of the world and I've already made my case on that, but between the events, I don't have to worry about, if I don't want to go the route of extra 20% XP, I can still do that and get 20, not just 5. The defense, I don't have to worry about going under, taking that dip, and what else? That's about the gist of it. I just, like I say, this is why it ended up being a Dark Horse and ended up taking that higher range spot for me. So, yep, that's that.
And then my number 4 is going to be the Squire. And now I feel like, again, the best case scenario is you like compare them to the Beast Slayer, and I can definitely see why people would value the Beast Slayer more. The big thing for me with the Squire is, again, I go to this late game potential, and I feel like the Squire, especially with like defenses, is a little bit more valuable than the Beast Slayer to me. That's just my feeling on the matter. They're so close in stats, but at this point you're literally like milking as much as you can out of them, and I feel like the defense is the potential with the Squire, even if it's something small by just a couple points, that is where I'm going to jump on board with. Yeah, you might sacrifice like the low end of the range skill. I know Puggo, he does a lot of, or he incorporates range, or what is it, throwing weapons into his builds, but that isn't like the biggest worry for me. I just think Squire has just a little bit more late game potential than the best of the Beast Slayers. And so, like, honestly, again, they could flip-flop, but I'm going with Squire above Beast Slayer.
Very good. Yeah, I got I don't have much to really say about it. I mean, I'm going to be talking about them pretty soon here. Yeah, I'm going to be talking about them pretty soon, but I agree with everything you're saying there. So, all right. So moving on, the next thing on my list, it's amazing how this is all kind of coming together here. So my next one on the list is going to be, I gotta find it actually. Let's see. There it is. Militiamen. Militia. Just militia, I guess. Now, militia for me is a... This right here, you cannot play the game. And I'm saying this as, like, I this is where I get a little cocky here. Because these guys could have easily been my number 1. And I have struggled with it because, man, it's really tough. It's tough for me not to have these guys as my number 1. They slip for a few different reasons, but this is the biggest thing. I could fight for these guys all day long. There is nothing about this character that drives me up a wall. The health is good. The attack is on par with It's the above average. It's the very good attack from 52 to 62. 52 to 62 is a sweet point for me. I like being in that range. That's where I prefer all my guys to be when I go to get these guys. They're when I go to the defense, 2 to 7. You're gonna get 2 to 7. At worst case, 2. That is a good case, in my opinion. That is beautiful. Okay, and then you get right over here to the fatigue, 93 to 105. That's a little above, more even above average. I can't say anything bad about that. And the resolve goes 33 to 45. Again, there's so much. There's no events. For some reason, they added no events to this. And the excluded traits are asthmatic. You're looking at clubfoot, dastard, fat. They can't hate the undead, which is kind of I don't know why. That's kind of weird. They can't be insecure. They can't be craven. So really, this is what it comes down to, guys. Oh, I missed the biggest point about these brothers and why they should be on a lot of people's list. Number one is this stinking cost right here. Your average militiaman starts out at 9, not 13 like brawlers, not 13 like lumberjacks. You shoot 9. Look at farmhands. Where's farmhands? Where the heck is farmhands here? Farmhands. 10 for farmhands. Like, are you kidding me? This is just average. Now, where does the cost go to? Well, I've seen them at 700 crowns buying them. Okay, I've seen them at 700 crowns buying them. I've seen them at 2,000. That is beautiful. And usually at 2,000, I've seen it up to 2,000. And
oh my goodness.
What's that?
I have not seen that. Generally, like
the reason I think the reason it is though is because it was was more the armor. Yeah, it was the gear. Yeah. So, but I'm pretty sure it was. I'm fairly positive I've seen him in the 2000s. Either that or I'm getting mixed up with the Legends mod.
Speaks to like the cost of it. That 2,000 sounds like an absurd amount.
Right. Well, but again, that could be a little bit of a crossover with Legends mod. I'll be honest about that. Either way, guys, there isn't a negative thing about these guys. There's a reason the next two ahead pulled it out for me, but I could easily. This is like there's one A and one B in my opinion, and these guys are there. And they're again. I have my reason for why, but I can't really get into it until I get to number one. So, but there's nothing bad about these guys. These are brothers that you should build your army. If I was doing the what is the campaign run where you can have up to 16 brothers on the field. All of a sudden I can't. Peasant militia. So the peasant militia, you can do these. You can have these. I would build a whole army of militia and say, screw you, Battle Brothers world, get ready because it's about to happen. This is what you look for. These are bad boys. And me talking the way I am, you think it would be number one. It's a struggle because of my other reasons. So I'm going to stop there. Militiamen at number 3. It's tough. So.
Yeah, I totally understand.
I bet you do.
Yeah, you'll be hearing about it soon.
Yep.
Number 3 is Farmhand for me. Now, Farmhand, I love Farmhand. And really, like, after everything that's said and done, it's the cheapness and cost effectiveness of Farmhand. Like, the big thing for me is you talked about Farmhand earlier and sort of alluded to it with the Wildmen, is just like, you can get like 6 farmhands at least for like the cost of a Wildman, and you're still like, you're rolling on all the chances for all those stats. You're still getting pretty equal fatigue on a farmhand to I mean, yeah, the Wildman's going to be above, but you're getting pretty close with the farmhand. I mean, like, all farmhands are just like hosses. They just have top tier fatigue in the game, and you got the health that's quality of life. You got solid melee, like pretty much average stat. It is actually average stats for the rest of the things. The big thing for me is, again, you throw $100, you get a farmhand. At any point in the game, because of their straight up fatigue being what it is, you can pick up a farmhand, and whether or not he is like an actual above like great talent spec farmhand, or he's just a regular run-of-the-mill farmhand, you're able to dump armor on him. Like, for me, farmhands never go away during the game unless it's like the ultra late game. I don't have a slot left. Like, I have all my guys figured out. Throughout the entire game, I will always be buying farmhand. It's chump change. You just throw a couple of coins on the floor, you get someone that you can spec with great armors. It doesn't matter if they're not like the most talented at dodging or attacking, even though they still have, again, average for those stats. Just the fact that it's $100 to set up someone who can just soak so much pressure and damage, because you can stack them with really great armors. It's just like, farmhands are just one of the go-to characters. I buy farmhands compared to like all the other characters probably 9-1. Like, I am always running farmhands, and I think they did at one point raise like the daily wages of the farmers. Doesn't really, I mean, it sucks, but their value still hasn't like diminished much at all. It's more like, all right, well, they were even more busted before and now they're still just busted. So I have farmhand at number 3, just because, again, it's like plug and play. You pick it up for stuff that you would scoff at any point of the game, and you have a brother that can wear just about anything you need, do anything with that fatigue.
So, is that it? Sorry, I didn't want to.
Yeah, that's all I have to say on farmhand.
So I got 2 things for you. Number 1, I want to just say, like, I love your illustration of that. Just throw some coins on the floor. I imagine you are truly a highborn in this situation. You're like going to a town and saying, "Farmhands, come forth," and then you just chuck coins at the ground, and you're like, you. Here's 10 coins to get the hell out of my face. You 10 coins to get the hell out of my face. You brawny boy, get in the front line. Here's some gear. You know what I mean? Like. But no, to your point, you make a great point there. It's like, literally, you can go, and there's so many towns that have farmhands. It's not like you're ever going to run out of farmhands or struggle. And that's one of the issues that I had with Beast Slayers, is one of those things where it's a great brother, but you just don't see him anywhere, all over the place. Farmhands, it's just like you said, just grab some coins out of your pocket, throw it on the ground, and just wait for the farmers to come walking out of the fields. That's, yeah. You know what I mean? It's literally Field of Dreams going on there. So, granted, that's baseball, but the point is this. I get why he's so high, and I'm sure there's people out there that are going to be in the same boat. There's me, who's like, I see them as early, and I have my eyes set on other things late game. But you, it's like, yeah, but at any point I can just build an army up of these bad boys. Scrap the ones that who gives a crap about, and then the one that I pull 3-star on melee or 2-star on melee, and more stars in other areas. It's great. But here's my question for you. This is where I'm going to make it to this question. You know, excluding the fact of, like, I'm going to go to the Wildman argument here. You could get in Wildmen who could still end up being a positive melee and maybe -2 range, right? And you still have a better chance at attack. You still have the equal chance at health, and a greater chance at fatigue, and a greater chance at resolve. Regardless if you like resolve or not, you still are getting a big jump in resolve. And if you look at the traits, again, I mean, it's free game when it comes to farmhands. I mean, farmhands can get just about any trait under the, in the book. And just compare, you got 5 here, and then if you look at Wildmen, it's like, holy crap, man, toss out half of it. They're like, they can't be cocky. They can't, there's the negative traits just aren't there anymore. So that's where I'm wondering, why would you where's the real, for lack of better words, damning value that a wildman doesn't make it, but a farmhand does?
It's purely cost.
Okay.
I think
I had a feeling that might be it, but
yeah. Again, I go back to, you buy like low end of wildmen. I mean, yeah, sometimes I find a farm hand at 300, but like the vast majority of them are just over 100 in cost.
Mm-hmm.
If low end of wildmen is 600, you're literally getting 6 farm hands for that price. And they're
farmhands at 100 crowns? I've never seen a farmhand at 100. I've seen them at like maybe 13 maybe. Like 100,
like
130 or
yes,
higher. But that's like super rare in my opinion.
Oh,
that's just my opinion though. I don't know.
Yeah, 95% of the farmhands I find are 110 or 130. And then
wow,
it's like every couple of towns I guess it wouldn't be 90, 95. It'd probably be like
not
70,
like 190, not like 190.
I swear
I feel like all the ones that I see are 190. But either way, okay. But
I always find 110, 130. Those are like the two most iconic numbers for my farmhand for me.
Okay.
And again, it's like I can buy a handful of them to one what's it called? Wildmen.
Right.
And that's where it's like, I don't think like the bonuses to the fatigue, melee, resolve like matter that much to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Wildman isn't going to be my late game brother. I can see where he would be. I wouldn't expect him to be for me. And same with Farmhand, I don't expect it to be like the late game brother. But you know how easy it is, like say you have some people injured, like before you hit like the ultra late game, you're sitting with about 15 guys in your party and you have some fodder. Like not every guy that you have in your party, I think this is true for almost everyone, you have like your really good guys and then you have the people that you don't really care so much about, but they fill in a role, and that is an extra body that, oh, they die, well, whoop-de-doo, I guess it was better them than my good guys. Like those placeholders, those bodies to get you up into the late game, to be able to challenge the more dangerous areas and feel like you haven't put that much of an investment into these guys, yet you pick them out of a town for exorbitantly cheap prices, like very cheap. You pick them out, you slap some good armor on them right off the bat because they have that fatigue.
Right. Yeah, no, I see what you're saying, and I think you answered the question there. If anything, it was just yeah. I mean, I get where you're coming from. When I think of getting into the mid to late game, I don't want to keep going back to level 1 in the fact of just like, to me it looks like fodder at later on. Not to say it is because I know you can get, you pick from the litter, but I don't know. Yeah, I just look at it like farmhand to me is so expendable in the late game that I'll just pick them up just for fun, not for actual reason to hold for a long ways. But if you're willing to do that, obviously that makes perfect sense. So but all right, well, let's continue then. So we're gonna go into my number 2 now. My number 2 was very controversial at first in my head because I really believed that I can make a massive bad argument against this character, a massive, but I also can make a massive argument for the character, and that's going to be simply, what do you think it is?
Hedge Knight?
Yeah, it is the Hedge Knight. It's the Hedge Knight, the big old big old hedgehog. Here we are. So here's the deal. If we're rolling right into stats, the biggest thing is they have the highest chance for health, they have the big chance, of course, 58 to 67 melee. Doesn't matter about range. Screw range for them. The defense, you're going to at least get 6 to 10. And, 0 to 5 for range. The fatigue is actually on the, I would actually say on the good, not quite very good side. Because it's at 105 to 110. Still, really, the higher end, you're looking at, let's go to the Lumberjack real quick here. So, like, Lumberjack is the same, right? Or actually, I think you get a better chance. Like, I just missed it here. Yeah, see, yeah, it's kind of weird. It's kind of a weird metric there, but it's 105 to 110, whereas the other one was 100 to 115. So it's kind of a weird. There's a little bit of a mix there. Otherwise, the resolve is high, 39 to 44, and who cares again about initiative? Now, this is where it gets even more interesting. You start looking at the talents, okay? You can't get stars in range, and you can't get stars in fatigue or initiative, which means that leaves you with resolve, fatigue, any of the defense, your health, or your melee. You're gonna get 3 total. So you're gonna get stars in some area that matters. That's the beauty of it. The problem is, what happens when you end up in resolve? What happens when you end up in, let's just say range for whatever's sake, and then you have it for health, your hit points. Then you're taking a risk. That's when it starts going like, oh, you're starting to sweat a little bit because it didn't work out the way you were hoping. Now, let's go into the excluded traits. Crap ton of excluded traits. You can't be nothing. You can't get any fear of beast, greenskins, undead. You can't have brittle or fragile. You can't be insecure. Oh, here we go. Irrational is that one. The cup pouring over. There's so many traits that you can't get that are bad. There are still some really bad ones. Drunkard. You can still be superstitious. You can still be gluttonous. So there are a stack of traits that are bad, right? But then we're finally going to get into... Well, I want to get the cost last because this is going to be the thing that hurts him the most. But we get into the events, right? You have the jousting tournament. You can get a chance for money. You could get injured. You can train an apprentice for a crap ton of stats and melee, hit points, and fatigue. You have... Let's see here. The worst one possible is Hedge Knight versus Hedge Knight, which can end up being the loss of a Hedge Knight or serious injuries. May have positive move with a raider, positive move given to refugee. It can teach a squire for 1 to 4, and then finally may start harassing villagers, which nobody really likes. That's just a stupid. I hate that little, scenario. But here's the biggest issue that I have with Hedge Knights, and I'm going to beat them down and I'm going to build them up finally. So here's the deal. Hedge Knights have a starting cost at 35 crowns and per day. You do that over a span of 100 days. That's 3,500 crowns. Now, the average Hedge Knight that I come across is 45 to 50 crowns per day. That's 4,500. That's, 5,000. Now, if you are playing this game for the ultra late game, more than likely you're getting a Hedge Knight, which means that over a span of 400 days, when you're really starting to face the end game bosses, you're looking at 20,000 crowns burned. Now, that's not even speaking when you get past level 11 or getting to level 11. You could be at 75 crowns a day. That's, keep throwing the math out there, right? So 14 or 15,000 or no, 4 I just lost my math here. 75 is 7,500. That's 15 every 200 days. That's 30,000. I'm trying to do this here really quick. 30,000 over a span of 400 days. Think about that, guys. That is an insane amount of freaking crowns. However, you also are paying... I mean, this isn't a however for good side. You're still paying 9,000. I mean, maybe you pay... I don't even know what the lowest cost of everything. Maybe it might be 7. I don't know.
Maybe.
I feel like I might have seen something at 7. I'm not 100% sure that I have, but I know that generally I see 9 to 12 is mostly what I see, but I have seen higher than that, up to like 15. So, or 16 even, I think. Either way, it's a massive investment. It's a huge investment. If you're good with your money, buy a hedge knight. If you're bad with your money, don't just buy in because of whatever. Remember, you're either buying a shiny trophy or you're buying a shiny turd. Like, you could easily get a low-end battle. Look at his lowest stats. 62 health, 58 melee, which isn't bad, but for the price tag, 105 for fatigue, 39. It's still a really good brother, but the overall final ending of it can look dirty. But why do I play this game is what it comes down to. There has never been a campaign. There has never been a campaign since the moment I have put my finger to the keyboard or to the mouse clicking into this game where I did not want a hedge knight. The hedge knight can change everything. Everything. You have a monk. One monk is, I get monks not because I want, this is why monks didn't make the list, and this is why I wanted to get this in here. Monks would only make this list because of hedge knights. I wouldn't care. I mean, don't get me wrong, monks have a great trait, they have great events either way, but the hedge knight is the main thing, because if I can have 2 hedge knights, I'm going to have 2 hedge knights, and they're going to dominate. And if I put my stats in the right spot, these guys are going to be absolute beasts. These stats, you have a great chance to get that 3-star in any of these areas to cause absolute destruction. You get 3 stars in fatigue, and you can still make this bad boy a beast. You get 3 stars in melee. Like, you can make him a beast. There's very little flaws to him, but there is I'd say like a 20 to 30% chance that you get one that just is not worth the cost that you bought him for. But it's all perspective, guys, at the end of the day. And that's why, for me, irregardless of the negative, I look at these things as shining. Like, they are the knights of, they are the oh geez, they are the banner of Battle Brothers until they come out with, like the DLC coming up, until they come out with something that can tell me otherwise. These guys are the shining example of what you want as the brute force to take on the late game scenarios, and that's where I stand at the end of it all.
Yeah.
So.
And I'm totally with you on everything. Like I said, he was in my top 10 as well, and like everything you said is why he's indisputably in like everyone's top 10, I'm sure. I am a really stingy dude, and
right,
that cost is just
it's
because
awful.
of that cost, that is such a big detriment to his value that, like, we both agree he's the example of like the best recruit in the game, but it doesn't mean like he's the most valuable, or like, how do I put this? His value is, he might be like the best potential in all the game, but there's more reasons that build into him, and like one of those reasons is costs. And like for me, I am very particular about costs, and I said it before, like I just can't get, like, I'm still gonna get hedge knights, but I'm gonna be crying tears of blood each time I pick up a hedge knight, hoping that it's the best it can be at the price that I get them for.
Right.
So yeah.
Oh,
I
know.
guess.
Yeah. Like I said, the negative makes it look twice as big as the positive. But when we're all getting down to it, the guy who's standing to on the web page, on the wiki here, is the hedge knight. It is the man who, when you walk into the field of battle and you see a hedge knight on the field, all eyes are on that hedge knight every single time. And maybe it's just our flaw as creatures, but that's just how it is. And I can't like ignore the fact of the actual brutality of this character and what he can do for other brothers on top of that, like apprentices. I mean, good lord, they were meant to be together. So, but yes, that's my number 2. But
all right. Well, I'll start to move towards the finish. We'll start with my number 2. I have the Messenger.
yep, there it is.
So this is right next to the Farmhand, particularly because I just think he's slightly better than Farmhand. Again, the only thing is like Messengers, you don't find them as much, but he's like a cheaper. Yeah, you're losing out on 10 fatigue, but Messenger is still the same fatigue as a Hedge Knight. Let's just get that through there. Same fatigue as a Hedge Knight, which is top tier for a lot of the recruits in the game. I mean, it's plus 15, plus 10 for the min and max range, above average. So it's like, it's still another recruit where you can slap on a lot of good gear on it. And the big thing that's different between the Messenger and the Farmhand that I'm really looking at, I mean, you could bring up Resolve, but the defenses. This was something I was actually unaware of, but like the potential for a Messenger with these defenses. I mean, you can technically make a case like high end of Messenger is low end Hedge Knight. Like,
a poor man's Hedge Knight, right?
Yeah.
Poor girl. Come on now.
Yeah.
Still really good. Still really good.
That's the crazy thing about it. 6 gold daily wages, it says here.
That's sick.
The big thing for me, again, is like I can sacrifice 10 fatigue for... And that's even if you are sacrificing 10 fatigue, because it's within the range of the Farmhand. It's sacrificing 10 potential fatigue for higher defenses and higher resolve. And they have good events too.
And lower cost. Like you were saying with the 6 crowns. I mean, that's...
Yeah, so it's like... 4 crowns
may not seem like much, but again, that's 400 a year, guys.
Yeah.
I'm about the numbers here. It still matters. Come on now.
Yeah. Like, I think the big thing, like, Farmhand, I think the cost is so low that it doesn't really matter in the long run. Or, like, people aren't going to, like, go out of their way to, like, oh, Messenger is so much better than Farmhand. But, like, if I'm being honest and looking at this critically, it's like, I guess it technically is better than a Farmhand. I always use Farmhands. I use Messengers too when I find them, but, like, technically speaking, I do think Messenger is technically, statistics-wise, better than a Farmhand. And so I guess it was one of those things where I was kind of like forced to put it up this high because like Farmhand has to be one of the top positions for me. And if there is a recruit who is technically, statistically, and costs less, or like statistically better than Farmhand and costs less, then why shouldn't I value it higher than Farmhand? So that's pretty much the reasoning behind Messenger being number 2.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what.
No, I can't. I knew. Well, obviously, I knew that this was gonna come up. I know, just because I'll tell you guys this much. I have a list that has all of the ones that he's gonna pick, and I purposely am trying my best not to look at. I haven't crossed out anything, so I'm just writing down as I go. But
yeah,
I had a feeling because I remember writing down Messenger at some point, but it made sense that it would jump ahead of Farmhand. So I don't want to like mislead anybody to this, but you know, I look at it and there's definitely a lot of negative traits gone, which is a big deal for me. And the defense is higher. I'm not surprised. Everything you've told me right now, this leading to this point, I'm just not surprised. They don't really have any like counteracting. I absolutely love Messengers early on in the game, and if you can buy a bundle of them and toss them all out and tell them to go send this stick to a different town, sure, go do it. I don't. At the end of the day, my Hedge Knight that I get, or not my Hedge Knight, but my my Lumberjack costs 2 times as much. You know, it's all logistically how you look at it. So I get it. I think it's good. So, all right. Well, then that brings it to number 1. And if you guys haven't been following this side of it, some of you might have guessed this, some of you may not have. And it's going to be a bit of a controversy here, a bit of controversy for many different reasons, but I have my little patch as to why I'm where I'm at. But the Squire is my number 1 most valuable recruit in the game, and it's simply this, okay? When I look at a brother and I'm just going to get the first part as to where I'm coming from at least, because the stats may not all follow suit, but when I go looking for a brother and I find a Squire who has good gear to start, decent gear, he's at 800, I've seen him at 700, I've seen him at 800, I've seen him at 900, and I've seen him over 2,000. So there's a big range, and that comes with the armor as well. When I see that and I get these guys, I realize that there is a untapped potential that comes through the excluded traits, through the actual stats that you'll see right here, that I just feel like is so much above average and where I like as my starting point, and has the variety to be more. And you see Squires all over the place as well. So it's not unheard of to come across something that fits your need right now, right then, and not having to worry about a negative event that traps you, right? So here's into the stats. You got 50 to 60, which is, again, average. But then this is that sweet spot I was talking about. 54, which 54 is actually higher than normal. Normally it's like 52, I think, is the average. So yeah, the 10 base gap there. So 54 to 62 is where I consider a perfect range. And then, of course, they can be archers. I mean, if you pull a 50 and you have 3 stars on it, the Squire can automatically be an archer, which actually works to your potential just because it already comes with good defense. The fatigue is pretty high, or is high for your average archer, I'd say. And then, of course, your resolve. But besides that, I like throwing axes, so boom, I have an opportunity to have a brother that is multi-classed. One of the things I like to do is use bags and belt brothers, and he fits that bags and belt build. I can still put a lot into his fatigue and still get a good return on helping out my other brothers with taking out shields, because I do like my quick hands and so on. Utility wise, he follows suit with everything. And then finally, getting to the resolve. I love resolve. I absolutely love resolve. Resolve to me can be a game changer. When you waver, you're losing negative 10% of all your stats. When you are running, you get, I think it's 15 of all of your stats go down. And with higher resolve, you can withstand so much in a fatigued battle. And one hit can change the tide of battle, and Squires seem to be above the grade in terms of that. So overall, when I look at a brother and I say cost, I say what matters most to me with fatigue, the resolve, the defense, the attack, and fine health, I see that. The downfall to Squires, and this is where I struggle putting them at number 1 compared to Militia, is the actual cost daily. 20 crowns daily. Early in the game, if you come across a Squire, I suggest grabbing one. However, you don't grab a bunch of them because of how much they cost. But when you mix them in with like a Hedge Knight later on, there's more resolve that comes from that. If you get a Swordmaster, you can get more defense. But again, the traits is where it starts falling back in line. When we fall back into the full circle again, almost every negative trait is about gone besides, like drunkard, superstitious, and gluttonous, which can suck. But there's so much potential to get a positive trait with this type of brother. Like almost all of the good traits are still there. I don't see one positive trait besides the Weasel, which isn't even that great. I mean, when you're running and stuff, you just have better defense. So anyways, again, I can buy one of these brothers and know that it fits everything I want to do in Battle Brothers, and with the stars aligning in the right spot, the sky's the limit essentially for me. But don't get me wrong, again, it's still a struggle. either way, I highly suggest the Militiamen, which I'm pretty sure I know what's going to be the next one. Any comments or anything you want to say to that?
Nope. I've already been over Squire, so again, I think it makes sense, like particularly like the top 4, I believe, or maybe it was top 3 of yours is kind of like starting with the 4th spot. I think you had Lumberjack.
Yep, it was Lumberjack. Yeah, Lumberjack, Militia, Hedge Knight, and then Squire.
Yeah, so Militia was the one that was kind of interesting. Like, I can understand Hedge Knight, why that was kind of weird. You mentioned it before, is like the top 4 are kind of weird because like 2 of them, there's particular reasons why they're up there. And it's like the Hedge Knight is one of those where it's like you're clearly choosing Squire mainly because it's so above average all around, like across the board. It is one of the best brothers for like having like a consistent just upgrades in stats all the way across the board. Like that's how it's probably higher than the Lumberjack even.
Right.
And then you have like the weird case of the Hedge Knight that comes in there, and then Militia and Squire are pretty much like going to have to be tied hand in hand.
Yeah, it is
and
tough. It is tough.
I will get right into it unless you have something else to say.
Well, the only thing I want to say is just to be completely transparent with everybody. The reason I had to separate myself from the Squire and the Militiamen being 1 and 2, or vice versa. I flipped those guys so many times, but the reason I threw the Hedge Knight all the way into 2 to split the 2 up is because I know without a doubt there's never going to be a time that I don't open the game up, start a campaign, and not have my eyes set on that famed item. I look at the Hedge Knight the same way. Hedge Knight could have easily been number 1 because there's no way I don't play this game without wanting one of them. But Squires have always been gold for me. They've always struck gold in some way. I'm not saying that they're the best brother in the game. I'm not saying that because logistically, if you look at the Militia, there's a huge case for them. But yeah. I've always seemed to strike gold with Squires, and I have to put that as my most valued. And that's why. It's a personal choice, and that's where I stand. So.
And I'll get into Militiamen then. Yes. I'll sort of keep this short. Like, Militiamen are pretty equal across the board. Well, they're slightly, and when I mean slightly, they're slightly below Squire across the board, except for Resolve. Like, everything else is very comparable. Squire is just more consistent and has a little bit higher like highs than the Militia. Mm-hmm. But yeah, just like comparable across the board except for Resolve. And again, like you appreciate that 40 Resolve. I appreciate 30 Resolve. So like I don't have any qualms with Militia's Resolve anyways. And so in the end, it's just looking at it and 10 less daily wages per day and cheaper upfront costs for Militia. And that's why I have Militia as higher than the Squire. And since like you can put Squire as your number 1, like that's why Militia is also my number 1. It's just I think all around throughout all the brothers in the game, Militia is the most cost effective for a brother who can be very strong for most of the game. Yes, he's not going to be the top tier brother. Like you said, like Squire is probably not going to be like the top tier ultra late game brother. But otherwise, yes, is a brother that will definitely be able to perform in the ultra late game and will perform spectacularly throughout the game. So yeah, I just think Militia and Squire are very similar in a way, and I just feel like I value more the cost than
right.
Yeah,
I think I was just gonna
really more to be said for me.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty simple, guys. I mean, if really crunch the numbers and look at how they play, if you've never used them or you have used plenty of them, maybe you say, hey, you know what, I just never seem to get really good militia. One of my biggest downfalls with militia, and it's something you can get easily with a squire because they share the same range, is the hit points. I, for some reason, always seem to get militia at 50 and 52 for health. And to me, I'm just like, why? Every single time, it feels like that's where they fall in line. And it's those little things that can put a sour taste in your mouth, regardless of what the stats say. And I'm sure that's why everybody's list is different. So that's perfectly fine. But one thing I got to give Overhyped Studios credit for since the beginning is they recognize that these guys they're militiamen. They've been trained in combat. They're meant for towns. They're not meant to be the hierarchy of highborn compared to why they're a lowborn. But then you have the squire, which they're the next step up. They are actually highborn. Oh, it doesn't say that they're highborn. Well, technically a squire is a highborn. You know what I mean? So when you look at it like through those lenses, you're gonna get a little bit more stats, and they're gonna want more money. So you're having to pay 11 more crowns. But ultimately, when you look at the excluded traits, there's just that odd upside that can make a squire an ultra late game brother, but you never have to worry about being like totally duped, and that's how I feel. That's how I've always felt. It's just been a personal choice, and just like you're looking at logistically the militiamen, and I can't hate on that one bit. I have nothing bad to say about that at all. So yeah. So anyways, guys, again, that's gonna be our list of the top 10. I know this has been a super long video, and I hope you guys had used the timestamps to be able to get into each one. I understand if you guys are, just playing a game, play it in the background. If you're new to the game, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this was actually helpful for you. And we'll be doing more top 10s, top 5s, maybe do some other ways of doing this. I'm going to make shorter videos for these, so that way you guys have, you don't have to sit through all of it. But yeah, it's always good to have an in-depth discussion, or really a raw thought about what somebody's doing or why somebody has something the way it is. So stay tuned for more videos like this. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It definitely helps the channel, helps out this type of content. And I will see you in the next one. Bye!